We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Hey, dads. Yeah, you, dads, fathers, all kinds of dads. Today, I have a great conversation for you. I'm with Dr. Ken Canfield. He's a nationally recognized expert in the field of fathering, family dynamics, and grandparenting. He has dedicated his life to strengthening families by empowering fathers and grandparents, creating a legacy of positive, lasting influence across generations. In this episode, you're going to get to hear Dr. Canfield share profound insights on fatherhood, how fathers can become pillars of strength, consistency, and nurturance for our kids. He'll dive into key strategies for overcoming barriers that many of us face, especially those of us who grew up with absent or challenging father figures. Whether you're a biological father, a stepdad, an adoptive dad, any kind of father figure, this conversation is going to offer you tools for embracing the unique and irreplaceable role you play in shaping future generations. Dr. Canfield is also going to unpack his concept of the I cans of fathering, including involvement, consistency, awareness, and nurturance. All the critical components of being an effective father. And if you think fatherhood ends when your kids leave the house, think again. Dr. Canfield believes fathering is a lifelong journey, extending into grandparenting and beyond. So whether you're a seasoned dad, a new father, or someone looking to improve your relationship with your kids, or even just a father figure, all of us are out there in the world. This episode will provide actionable advice and plenty of inspiration. Stay tuned for a rich discussion on how you can leave a lasting legacy and become the father your children need. You won't want to miss it. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the podcast where we're breaking the molds of modern masculinity and setting out to prove that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. And today, more than one way to be a father also. I am very excited today to welcome a new acquaintance, somebody who I've just started following recently, Dr. Ken Canfield. Dr. Canfield, say hello.
Hey, good to be with you, Mankind brothers. We've got a lot of work to do. Fathering is our opportunity to express to another generation just how important men are.
And there we go. So that tees us up for this episode already. Dr. Ken Canfield is a nationally known leader and scholar. He's committed his life to strengthening families and fathers. He's the founder of and continues to engage in several organizations dedicated to improving family well-being, most notably the National Center for Fathering. Go see it at fathers.com, where he has served as the president for 16 years. He is also the president of the National Association for Grandparenting, Grands Matter, MATTER.org, which he founded in 2016. Dr. Canfield is the author of numerous articles, popular and scientific. His work has appeared in Psychological Reports, Educational and Psychological Measurements, The World and I, Parents, Today's Better Life, Living with Children, and New Man. He's the author of the award-winning 7 Secrets for Effective Fathers, The Heart of a Father, The Adventures of Fatherhood series, They Call Me Dad, as well as several book chapters in edited texts. Besides publishing, Dr. Canfield has been heard on daily weekday radio commentary. Today's Father aired on more than 400 stations nationwide from 93 to 2006, and now Grands Matter Radio since 2016. He has been interviewed on the Oprah Winfrey Show twice NBC's Today Show, ABC's World News Tonight, Focus on the Family, and numerous radio programs. I am super honored to have connected with you by happenstance and to be learning about your work. So you kind of teed us up for the first question. So how does fathering fit into this healthy mankind quest that we are all on?
Well, I think, first of all, it attunes you to another generation. All men are fathers biologically or father figures. And part of our destiny is what we're committing to future generations, many of which we will never see. And this is so critical because the way we live our lives, the things that we teach and pass on, is that legacy factor. As we mature in age, we recognize we have a role to play there. And right now, young men and young daughters too need healthy, responsible fathers to guide them. You know, one of the attributes in looking at fathering is this role of consistency. Men, like it or not, you're like the Rock of Gibraltar in the sense that you provide a reference point in life. And to the extent that children or others can look to you as they chart a course in uncharted waters that you haven't been in, that gives a sense of confidence and security that is necessary for healthy brain development. We know in research the brain it requires not just the sense of security and safety, but also, and this is a tough area that we need to deal with, that soothing activity. You, as a father, even though you may have had I'd say a hard dad or a difficult dad or no dad, really bring a soothing sense of presence to your child throughout their life course. So I'm fascinated by all the roles that we play and have played historically. And I just want to encourage you to excellence in this endeavor because it will distinguish you, maybe more so than anything else.
That's a beautiful answer. And it leads me right into, so what are some of the ways, right? As you said, many of us grew up with hard dads or absent dads or no dads in our lives. And so kind of charted, or dads who provided very strange role models. Like I'll own that one. My hands up. I had multiple father figures and fathers. I had two stepdads and a dad, right? All provided wildly different models for what fatherhood was supposed to look like. What are some of the core things when you start? You've been working with fathers and fathering for decades. What are some of the core pieces that you start with when you're teaching fathering?
Well, I think you hit it right off. And men, we can't be the fathers that we want to be until we're first the sons. And you may say, what's up with that? Unless you process, as just has been shared by Boyson, those issues that you faced with your fathers or father figures, you can't fully express what's deep down in the core of your being. And so a lot of that is dealing with some of the pain and loss. And this isn't easy. Now, I encourage this. I do believe that your history, that's his story, the story that you have inherited from your biological father, whether you ever knew him or not, the father figures in your life have left imprints on you. And the best place to process that, I believe, is in a small group with other men. Now, notwithstanding if you're married or in a situationship, so to speak, whoever that person is will force and bring out some of what there is in the core of your heart and life. Yes. And once you deal with those deficits and attend to them, you're ready to get tuned up to be the father figure and the father to those children under your what I'd say, sphere of influence. And once you get to that, I think there are some four dimensions that you need to really consider to be a father of excellence. And I've simplified them, and this is looking at annals of research and combing through both the history of fatherhood, because this isn't just a new thing, it's been there a long time. And what are those common things that we need to do to provide for our children and ultimately our children's children if you have that opportunity? And I call them the I cans of fathering. And I'll unpack each one. And basically, it's involvement, consistency, awareness, and nurturance. Those dimensions are kind of the overarching principles that will be faithful and will guide you to excellence. And that's what I think we need to strive for. Just moving the needle in the positive direction, because many of you have started like at a -5 or a -10, depending on your life story. Just moving those forward 2 or 3 notches is going to be a positive contribution. And for those that are in the positive because you had a good heritage, you just can't rest on the laurels of your fathering. You have got, meaning the fathering that you received from your dad, you got to carve some new territory, and there's major territory that needs to be covered. So let's talk about involvement. It's not just the quantity of time, it's the quality of time. And you don't get to quality unless you have a certain amount of quantity. It is kind of funny. I think of one book that was written in the UK, The 1 Minute Father. Now, that sounds real management focused and so forth, but it just doesn't happen that way. The reality is that you and I have 168 hours every week if your children are still at home. And you know what the research says? Dedicated time of interaction, irrespective of screen influence and the other things that are taking away from that intentional time, we'll spend as little as 10 minutes a day with our child. So that's like 70 minutes in a week. And you may say, that's a lot of time. It is, but it's not the time that they really need and deserve from you. And let me just tell you this, there's reciprocity that comes. Dads that are engaged live longer, live healthier lives, adopt less risky behaviors. Why is that? Because they don't want to do stupid stuff like drink themselves into a stupor or smoke themselves up, because they have a responsibility. So, all to say, the prioritization of that 168 hours is so key. And how in the early years, in the middle years, I'm thinking teenage years, even in the young adult years, and just let me throw this in, dad, you're a dad all the days of your life until you're in the grave at rest and at peace. It just is that way. So the prioritization is real key in this. Now, involvement means looking at your schedule, thinking ahead, planning. And you may say, hey, my kids are gone. I raised them and now I'm going to have some fun. Well, if those kids follow in the footsteps that you've led, they're likely to meet others, have more kids, and now you're in a grandfathering and a surrogate role to whoever their spouse may be. And so this fathering is so important. And men who, I say, stand up and really look seriously at that involvement, they are doing the work that is so, so needed.
I'm going to do the I can again. Involvement, consistency, awareness, and nurturance are the pieces. And there are two that really jump to me. You kind of hit involvement in a really cool way. Awareness and nurturance. So it seems that, just in a generation or 2 generations, right? We have the silent generation, the boomers, my dad's a boomer, and then me. these ideas around awareness as a father, or awareness in fathering, and nurturance in fathering have changed radically over the last 40, 50 years. Can you talk about what you see out there and how that's changed?
Certainly. Well, I was teaching in Moscow in the 90s at the Moscow School of Psychology. And I was talking to dads because in that culture at that time, alcoholism, early death of men was prevalent. I mean, it was just that case. And it occurred to me, I was talking about the mystery of fatherhood. And I described being an attendant to my children's birth with their mother. And they looked at me, Boyson, like I was speaking Swahili. What? Well, you were there at that birth? And I said, yes, it was so powerful. And they looked like, what was that like? Because in the culture at that time, and I think it still is kind of prominent, babushka or grandmother came over and took over that pregnant wife of theirs in the 9th month, and dads were, distant and separated. And as I unpacked it, they were just in awe as I talked about catching the child, cutting the cord. Now, we were in a hospital all of these 5 births, but it doesn't make any difference if you're doing it at home. But the attachment and the connection, I call that the 8th wonder of the world. We know the other wonders, the pyramids in Egypt, the gardens over here and there. But when you hold a child, it does something deep in your heart. Now, that awareness brought these guys to a new level. And what I would say, the awareness of what's going on in your son or daughter's life is so critical. It doesn't mean you need to be the FBI, the Fathering Bureau of Investigation, and get in their stuff and read their diary and tap their phones. No, 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 no. It just means that you need to build that awareness through one of the secrets or distinctives of effective fathers by being an active listener. Now, I guarantee if I could interview your child right now, and let's say that child's a teenager, uh, they could probably give me the answer to any question from their dad's perspective, knowing what he thinks and how he's going to respond. Kids, unfortunately, or actually fortunately, are sharper than you, Dad. They have observed your behaviors. They see things, they see inconsistencies and so forth. And this is refreshing. That's why this reciprocity from you being a good dad is going to help you grow. It's going to help you tune in ways that you wouldn't any other. And so your involvement with children, if you're not a natural dad, you're adoptive dad, you're a foster dad, or a father figure, this involvement will enhance you. So, to go back to our analogy, the I-CANs, I would say this. If you think of the 4 walls of a house, involvement, consistency, awareness, and nurturance, involvement is the front door. It's how you gain access. And I know some of you dads are dealing with that. The court system, it says, in times past that, your time is limited. The mother gets all the custody and so forth. So you're struggling there. But awareness is the back wall of this house. And guess what? Typically, that's where thieves come in and destroy. You got to see and understand what are those negative influences in your child's life and how are they being overcome by the good and the investment that you're creating by not only listening, but asking good questions. And when those responses come, paraphrasing back to your child and back to the adolescent to see if you're really tuned in to what they're saying. And this, again, is a trait that distinguished effective fathers from fathers who are just, run of the mill. They're going to get this at school or get this from their peers. I'm convinced that getting it from you is sacred and powerful. And I encourage you in that process.
Wow, that is very well said. I have learned with my own kids, who now one of them just made it out of their teens, is now 20, and the other is turning 18 tomorrow. Yeah, wow is right. And I'm an adoptive dad, so I've had a very different kind of fathering journey, a different kind of fatherhood journey. And the reflective listening is like, absolutely. And where I've had to overcome some of my own stuff was around my judgmental instincts around things, to learn how to not shut my kids down, learning how to like just validate, listen and validate, instead of listen and correct, listen and shift, listen and do whatever. It seems like my dad did a lot of telling, and I do a lot more listening and inquiring.
Well, that's not uncommon. The fathering sermonette, we could recite that over and over, and your children will pick up just by observing your behaviors what you believe. And that's why this asking questions is so important in a non-confrontive way, but in a casual way. And it will invite dialogue that is important as they mature through life. Because I guarantee the need to come back as you face milestones, not only first car, but first job, first house, first move, first serious relationship, when they may adopt children themselves, being adopted, or whatever that is, they'll come back and they will ask if there is relational capital that has been built during that time. You know, the other component that you mentioned is this one of nurturance. The two things that brain or neuroscientists say are necessary for healthy growth is for those individuals, and we're talking you, Dad, because you're the unique individual, that are your children seen and are they soothed? I spoke a little bit about that. Seen is they're recognized, that in the busyness and distractions that all of us face in life, that there is dedicated time that you see what they're doing, that you're able to bless them as appropriate and encourage them with words that come from you. I remember I was working in an inner city with children who are their dads were incarcerated. And I was working with the incarcerated dads to encourage them, even though they're confined at this time, that they still had a role to play in their children's lives. And I remember in this one inner city setting that we had the dads in the prison write letters to their children and send them to the children. And it doesn't have to be long-winded, but simple. I'm thinking of you. I'm saying a prayer for you. I hope you're doing well, whatever you're led. And in visiting one of, at this time, young adolescent women in the inner city of a large metro area, we came in and said, you got this letter from your dad some months ago. We were arranging a visitation where this child would go to the prison, spend the day with the dad, because I can't tell you the benefits to the dad. The dad looked forward to that. The dad didn't want to do anything that would get him put, in confinement or solitary. He was more responsible. So many positive benefits. So we asked this young girl, did you get that letter? And she said, oh, yes. And I said, what did it say? And she said, let me go get it. And Boyson, she brought it in. And I said, where do you keep it? Because I saw her opening up this book. She said, I keep it in my Bible. And I'm like, what? And she opened it up. You know, Dad, your words are like holy, powerful, living um, uh, parts of life that help a child put together things that may be broken. And then she read it, and I'm thinking, this rocks. So when you think of this nurturance, the nurturance can come verbally. The nurturance, if you have a healthy relationship, uh, and it means if your dad beats you and you're in that place, I mean, I'm talking physically beat you, and I'm talking to dads right here. uh, there's a tendency to maybe be cautious or to be in somewhat fearfully afraid that you would exhibit that same sort of discipline and behavior with your child. And so that's what you need to get in tune with. But the blessing that you give by a pat on the shoulder, a hug, side hug if a young woman's developing, a touch of the head, a blessing is something that we need to regain because healthy touch really infuses a sense of immunity. And what do you mean immunity? Well, researchers, my younger brother's a surgeon, and unfortunately, doctors are not taught in medical school the super value of being, bedside caring and even a healthy touch and listening and so forth, because it's just come in and do the deal, give the meds and so forth. But your touch and your blessing, however that is something that not only empowers, but it stimulates the hemoglobin in the bloodstream. And what happens there? I mean, good nurses know this. Is it brings about T cells, fighter cells that often protect when disease is in the forefront. So think of this, Dad. There are a lot of social diseases out there. There's just a lot of stuff that come on the screens of your children. You getting down on their level, being kind and approachable, has something that will build an immunity, a reservoir of trust that will be long lasting. And so that's an aspect of the nurturance that we can provide, particularly during times of grief. And grief comes when your child or a friend of your child goes through a hard time. And you can come and just listen and comfort.
Thank you. Yeah, beautifully said. You've used the word blessing a couple of times, and so there's some connotation there that may ring for some folks who are listening in a different way than you intend. And I also want to just throw some words that we use in men's group because some men are uncomfortable with the word blessing, right? So we talk about honoring,
Right.
and this is something that you can do with your kids, right? Like, I would just want to honor,
Mm-hmm.
recognize, and there's
Mm-hmm.
there's a nobility in this kind of recognition with our kids, right? To see something, to notice something from that place of awareness as a dad, and to say, wow, I just want to really honor, I want to recognize, I want to call out this thing that I saw you do, this way of being, this value, this something that just calls forth something in the kids. I watch it happen in my kids. They get big, literally get bigger as they are blessed and honored in these ways, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want to. I hope this doesn't create any sort of blockage, just blessing, because it has spiritual connotations. But let's flip the script. And what's the opposite of bless? Curse, cuss. You just didn't measure up. Why didn't you, make 100? 95 isn't good enough in this family. Uh, why didn't you make that kick or block that thing? And what happens, and this is where this judgment can come in, that can leave a lingering odor that just takes a kid down. So the opposite is to infuse goodness. That's, what blessing is to infuse aspiration. And that doesn't mean there aren't times where you sit and say, oh, you flunked this test. What could you have done to, move it forward? There is appropriate times. That in some ways, healthy discipline is a blessing because in incarcerated settings, and why I'm so into that right now is I'm chairman of a group that takes care of guys getting out of prison. How do you prevent
Yeah.
recidivism? And I can tell you, and we have 100 beds at 2 different facilities. And I've gone and talked to these guys, 90+%, or maybe 95, had little or no connection with their father. And what they're yearning for is healthy discipline. The thing they didn't receive, they had to get by being behind iron and concrete in a prison. And if they would have just had some gentle, corrective, but decisive guidance at the right time in their life, it would have avoided a lot of lost humanity and costs, notwithstanding others that had to pay for the support of this long imprisonment. And so this is where dads are so important. And I've found that getting these guys out and as part of the reentry to life is dealing with the curses, the wounds, the deficits that they inherited as a child. Now, dads, I don't want to say everything depends on you, but I want to say often dads and men underestimate their role and influence. And I know that moms are important too, and dads cannot be moms and moms cannot be dads. I'm just saying it's time for dads to rise and address the perils and the problems of fatherlessness by being engaged, heart-filled dads who are making a difference.
Beautifully said. So for those dads out there who didn't have good role models, where can we go to learn fathering skills and to get the kind of mentoring that we might need as adult men to improve on this path?
Well, first of all, I would say the most important is some other dads, dads on this podcast, or if you're in a small group with Mankind dads, talk about the issues you're facing, whether it's your kid facing drug problems, your kid facing, expectations and so forth. Talking to other dads is one place. There's a storehouse of resources on fathers.com. Over the years, I've collected articles, tips, ideals, and some hardcore research that say basically you are a difference maker. In addition, I think listening over and over to simple podcasts like this and others will reaffirm the message that is there. And then talk and do some exploration about who are fathers who made a difference, models that you can look to. And some of those you may have never met. You may read about them. They're heroes in literature or your field of study. I know there is a stream of healthy fathers out there. Find them, drink deeply from those waters, and, recognize, that there are father images that make a difference. And, also, if you have any spiritual depth or history, I think that in and of itself can bring a wealth of information. I tell those that come from a Judeo Christian background, notwithstanding all the others, it's interesting that the deity known within the canon and annals of history describes himself in fatherly terms. And it's like, what? And I say over and over, he is vested in fathers here, because he disclosed himself as a father, our Father who art in heaven, and it's like, oh, I never thought of that. And I think there's a richness there in the spiritual, what I call makeup that's in each of us. And I know, contrastingly, there are some bad dudes out there you got to stay away from. There are fathers who lie, abuse, cheat, and that's the stuff we need to put to the side and recognize if we're going to be the father that our hearts desire and our children need.
Thank you. So final thought. So you've said it already. It'll be in the show notes, where to go to learn more, fathers.com, where to get connected, where to learn more about the work that Dr. Ken Canfield's been doing. How about speaking again, and you've been doing it, but what's an aspirational message that you would like fathers to hear right now based on where you see signs of hope and excitement out there in the world? What do you have to say as an aspiration for the dads out there?
Oh, that's great. I think you said it in your question. How do we build hope-filled fathers? Now, there's a reservoir of research recently that comes in the science of hope. Hope is not just an emotion, hope you have a good day. Hope is a pathway where we as fathers have agency. And when we beam messages of hope, positive things that you see in the future, you tap into the prophetic nature of fatherhood. We can give because we're living history, like it or not, and we're getting older as the days go on. But we know things that our children and those who look to us for guidance don't know. We can give aspirational, positive messages. Now, in doing so, we need to also give instruction and guidance about the barriers that inhibit hope, that if you go down those roads, hope will disappear like a mirage. And the pathways are so critical because they give us goals or benchmarks that we can move forward on. So I would say the big picture of casting hope for your children, the pathway to get there, and then let them know, I'm here. I'm with you in this journey. Let me know how I can help because I want to.
What a beautiful wrap. Dr. Ken Canfield, I am so honored to have had this time with you. I hope that we will get to speak again, and I feel inspired by your message.
Awesome. Well, dads everywhere, mankind brothers, let's go get them, because in a positive way, we are those hope-filled agents. So let's do the best, first in our own household, our extended family systems, and those that we love. And I'm with you in this journey.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.